Good. Good morning, everybody. Um, Thank you for being here. And so today's session is the second in a series of 5. And these are info sessions. So they're not the full convening of the working groups. The info session today is on markets and buyers. Yesterday, we had an overview of the farmers and producers. Coming up on Wednesday is the flyover of our Access, Equity, and Sovereignty Working Group. And then Thursday, we have 2. In the morning, it's the info of the Infrastructure Working Group, and that's related to the physical infrastructure of food systems like buildings and food hubs and transportation and logistics, all that fun stuff. And then the last one, Thursday afternoon, will be Farm and Food Business Finance Working Group. And all of the recordings will be available by the end of the week. Give us time to process through YouTube and upload on our website, which is Food Future Western New York. There we go. So the way we'll spend our time together today, and I'll try to make as efficient use of your time and keep everybody on schedule. We need to take a little look at where we've been to better frame the role, the etiology, the role, and the evolving role and mission of our working groups. So this is how we'll frame our time together. And we will have some introductions. I'm not sure if you can see the folks, but let's introduce our team of NYSOG and Food Future Western New York personnel. So I'll ask Rachel Granditz if she'd like to introduce herself first.
Hi, thanks for joining us, Eve. Nice to meet you on Zoom. I'm the diversity manager with NYSOG, and I started 3 months ago. Really grateful to be here and learn and be part of this project and get to know everyone better.
Thank you. Deanna.
Hello again, Eve, and hello to everyone who's watching the recording. My name is Deanna Garwal, and I am the Program and Communications Manager here at NYSOG. Similar to Rachel, I started just about 3 months ago. So anything regarding our communications when it comes to newsletters, upcoming social media efforts, email, I am your girl. I'm really passionate about food justice, so I am very happy to be here and on the NYSOG team, ready to learn.
Thank you. And Kristen.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I actually am closing in on my first month here at NYSOG as the CEO, and really excited about our working groups and getting to know all the folks involved so we can move forward with all the great projects that we intend to have. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's Team NYSOG. Our contact information will be up on the last slide. And if you are participating in this session as a live listener in, or if you're reviewing this and in the recorded format, we'll connect with you for a survey so that you can let us know when you think your availabilities might be, so that you could accommodate participation and commitment to 1, 2, or maybe all 5 working groups. But we'll follow up with a copy of the PowerPoint and survey. So moving forward, it's my controls go to sleep for a second there. There we go. So we are here today because of work started just within months of the pandemic. And the Western New York Regional Food System Initiative was initiated and launched by a group of funders that pooled resources to create the Western New York COVID-19 Community Response Fund. And part of the charge that the appropriation of funds, which was to NYSOG and Western New York Foundation, was to help better understand why we were seeing the impacts of the pandemic on our empty grocery store shelves. So, we tend to be a little disconnected from really the tangible output and expression of that global tether to the food system. And trending news reports in early pandemic, would indicate that there was a breakdown in foods movement. There were embargoed ships. There were no truck drivers. There was food rotting in college, kitchen and restaurants, refrigerators. And it was really when we started to see empty slots on our Western New York store shelves, and more importantly, not only hearing but witnessing the influx, the unprecedented increase of need at our local food pantries and the food banks for newly food insecure households, or magnified food insecurity for households that had already been jeopardy. So philanthropy said, help us understand why this is happening and all the factors that come into play, and then come up with some kind of a plan that we collectively could work toward achieving sustainable changes in Western New York. So we went through an 18-month consultant-led study, and that looked at not just food insecurity, but of course, all of the factors that contribute to food insecurity, and all of the factors for all of the primary functions of the food system, which we define as production of food, processing of food, distribution of food, access to food. And then the fifth and last function of the food system is waste, capture of waste, and as well as land regeneration. So we know that along a systems approach, when there's a impact or a ripple in one element, holistically up chain, down chain, around the whole circle, there are other either extenuating or resulting impacts. So the assessment that we undertook, literally with hundreds of participants, because we were adamant that this would be a partnership with consultants, and highly informed and highly participatory by the people who have a lived experience in the 9 counties of Western New York that are listed here at the slide. The reason why we went 9 counties is traditionally we look at Western New York as a group of the 8 counties. But the food banks that serve the food pantries in those 8 counties are Feed More Western New York, as well as Food Link in Rochester, which serves almost half of the eastern edge of the 8 counties. So it was important that we included the service area and location of both food banks, but also adding Monroe as part of the map and footprint of this work made sense because of the cultural exchanges, the movement of food between Buffalo, the 2 largest urban areas, Buffalo and Rochester, and for another host of reasons. So it's a 9 county initiative, and we wrapped it up in September, the very end of September, with a reveal of the final report. The cover is pictured down below, a reveal of the multiple hundred pages of the final report that was written by the consultants. And so where we ended up with the closing of phase 1, which was called the Western New York Regional Food System Initiative, and now launching into what is phase 2, or we call it the Food Future Western New York Work, is we've got a comprehensive final report with we've got somebody who counted them. They're not enumerated in the report, but we have a board member who counted every distinct recommendation, and she came up with 144. And we've got the framework that we utilized during the consultancy that is still continuing forward. And we'll get into that in a slide or two. And very broadly, we were left with or resulting with not only a report, but very, very, very broad findings summarized in these 3 statements, and very broad opportunities stated in these 3 statements. Those would be the elevator points when trying to tell somebody, well, we undertook this consultancy, and very broad, this is what they found. And very broadly, these are some opportunities that when we get into action steps, can really collaborate towards sustainable change. If you have any questions, also, if you're in the live event, please pop them in the chat, and our team will help address and process those. So the framework that I spoke of is known as a collaborative network. And the framework that we developed in partnership with the SCALE team of consultants consists of, you see the biggest bubble is all possible food system stakeholders, working with NYSOG as the external backbone support organization with 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But we really focused on developing a regional leadership team that would help guide the consultants. And then from that regional leadership team, or it was historically known as the Regional Advisory Council, we had 5 working groups during the process. And I like this graph that everybody is connected. It's very, very similar to a network map that you often see, like, you know, a scattering of snowflakes with all these threads. This is just a higher level of view showing where primary interactions are. But during the assessment phase, we were guided by one of our key partners, Dr. Samina Raja, and the University of Buffalo Food System Lab, which is part of their school of planning. And the one of the strongest, if not the strongest lens that we worked with and were charged with the consultants was equity. As you're working through this assessment, we've got to understand the disparities in assets also through an equity lens, and disequities that are present in all geographies, across all the communities, across all the ethnicities and other various diversities. So the participants of the Regional Advisory Council, as well as the working groups, worked very hard and diligently to come up with these basic operating principles. We are holding these principles forward for the work ahead under the Food Future Western New York. And I think I was going to say one of the most important ones. They're all important, but focus on system change rather than band-aids. We're not going down this work with a 5 to 10 year minimum focus to keep going back and coming up with strategy responses to the same issues. So we are action-oriented, sustainable change focused. And we've got higher education institutions. We're so lucky in a rural area in 9 counties to have a wealth of higher ed that we can tap into, as well as research firms and consulting firms that can help us understand the data we need and how we can use that data to inform our plans. So these will be the goals going forward. So just a real quick slide on why this regional collaborative network. And I like the Aspen Institute Community Strategies Group's little quote there, that high functioning networks are key to achieving food system goals. Absolutely. When we talk about food systems, it's usually in a vaster geography. Maybe it isn't, maybe it is a town-oriented geography, but we know that food moves well beyond geopolitical boundaries. So if you're looking at understanding, assessing, changing and shifting the culture of a defined area's food system, it's usually a broader geographic area. And time and again, it's been shown that building a collaborative network, there are 3 different networks that are listed there: cooperating, coordinating, and collaborating. But a collaborating network is oriented toward effectuating that fundamental long-term change, which is what we're hoping for. That's the concrete action, non-band-aid approach, sustained approach. And we develop trust, we develop relationships that benefit all. That's akin to the collective impact model, of which we are also operating within. And I didn't highlight that the high trust networks may have the highest level of risk. We've already proven that this network exists through the phase 1 consultancy, and we're carrying the assets over. So I'm hoping we weathered any risk, and we are just going for the greatest chance for systems change. That's the goal of the work. And knowing that it's not the goal of the work in the next 3 months, it's the goal of the work for long-term sustained network activation. So participatory, that's why we're here to talk about the working groups. We have a historic framework that was utilized during the consultancy. And in part, the regional leadership team and then the working groups that stemmed from the leadership team. In fact, historically, this was called the Regional Advisory Council. I've got to change that slide. They were convened in part. So between these 2 bodies, there were probably nearly 200 people that convened and interacted throughout the course of almost a 2-year time period with the consultants. But they were formed not only to begin to motivate work towards sustainable change, but to provide the consultants with a ready set of think tanks, knowledge base, and connections to broader networks. So the work going forward will be more action oriented. So under Food Future, Western New York, phase 2, the consultants have recommended that we rename the Regional Advisory Council, and we are calling it the Regional Leadership Team, and that its role, we had 21 people, and that's probably where we're going to shoot for seating people as a roster, shift from primarily advisory to being a stronger leadership role, maybe akin to maybe the board of directors of the project. So our board of directors at NYSOG will work very closely with the regional leadership team, but a lot of the magic will occur in the relationship among the working groups, and then the relationship with the working groups and the regional leadership team in guiding the work forward. If you're interested in learning more about the regional leadership team, you can reach to any one of us after you've viewed or participated in the webinar, and we'd be happy to talk to you about your interest in either learning more or even being considered to be part of this role. And as you can see, we had this consultant's recommendation to be more representational of farmers, food businesses, farm worker, and labor organizations. So we'd be especially interested if that's a role you play and would be considered, would like to be considered to join that. But we're here to talk about working groups. And as the consultants underscore, the working groups will remain the most important component to assuring that the Food Future Western New York initiative really is rooted and informed from participants upward, from the bottom up, and locally rooted. They've strongly recommended that we equip each of the working groups with access to discretionary funds and support with staff and outside consultants, and providing the best possible support so that the working groups can be successful, not only in continuing to share and learn info among each other, but to move toward action. And it sounds like a big lift, but working groups will be the employer, so to speak, of all of the wraparound supports that we have been funded to provide. And by we, I mean NYSOG. And by funded, I mean that we have been fortunate to have been awarded a grant from the Moving Forward Together Fund, which is part of the Western New York COVID Community Response Fund, managed by the Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo, which funds this work of launching Food Future Western New York in full for 2 years. So we are out the door with hitting phase 1 gas pedal and ready to revise and reconvene our working groups. So the framework I mentioned had the historic, had some precedents, and the participants created, going in with the consultants, we originally said, well, I think we'll have 4 working groups, and we gave them names. Once we brought in people to actually be part of the working groups, they're empowered. We work for them. They actually spun off and created a new working group called Infrastructure, because infrastructure the talk of infrastructure was evident in almost all of the other 4 working groups, that it really needed its own specialty focus, and that the Food Equity Working Group, originally named, was renamed by the participants Access, Equity, and Sovereignty, as a better way to represent that and acknowledge that we have Indigenous populations in Western New York, and we racial or equity through primarily a racial lens, and access relating to households of any socioeconomic and demographic that have unstable access to food. So this is the framework we're carrying forward, but knowing that these are living documents that we can flex and change. We can have subgroups within these working groups that could be ad hoc. There's an issue or opportunity that needs quick response to. We can peel off, do a little bit of an ad hoc 3 or 4 meeting, and boop, we got money, or we brought together partners and this opportunity was taken advantage of, or this issue was resolved, and that sub working group is dissolved and we come back up into the greater working group. A lot of flexibility, and there is no static approach to any of this, because the food system changes every minute of every day. So where do we begin? So we're launching the work of the working groups with a foundational list of potential action steps that can be brought into the working groups for either some prioritization, for collaboration, and there are a whole lot of other functions that the working groups can choose to do. But we're building on a foundation that was established with the historic working groups, which includes these 1-pagers that was a high level mission and goals setting for that particular working group, as well as the short-term projects that those legacy groups were working on. We start with that, plus all the recommendations that are specific to that working group's sector or constituency base. So for the markets and buyers working group, that's, this is another topic where it's the working groups hone in on some very specific issues. But when you're looking at the food system, all of these working groups end up being one big working group that represents the food system. But it gives a little bit more efficiency in looking at specific functions of the food system through specific sectors or constituencies. But the participants of this working group decided that the purpose of this markets and buyers group is to help identify and better understand market barriers and opportunities for local, regional, and equitably produced food producers to take action to address those. The main objectives: increase local and regional food purchasing at higher ed and other institutions, and identify local, regional, state policies that currently hinder stronger regional and equitable food market channels, or if established, would enhance them and plan to selectively address them in partnership. So policy really focuses in on this group, which policy is across all the working groups, but there's some very specific barriers and hindrances that were in place that limited the procurement policies at state and government levels. So we start with that, the foundation, and then we also start with looking at the findings and the recommendations. So let's get into a little bit more of the specifics of this markets and buyers working group. So very broadly, pulling way back, and all of this information is in the final report, which has that front cover, and it's available on our website, which is foodfuturewny.org. The full report is there, as well as an executive summary. But as far as the focus of the markets and buyers working group, the consultants, because this was infrastructure was a spinoff of this particular group. So the consultants wrapped their findings under the title in the report for markets, infrastructure, and supply chains. But they made very specific recommendations just for markets and buyers and just for the infrastructure working group. But pulling way back, I'm not going to read these because I'm assuming you've read them while I'm talking. These are their generalized findings. Some are positive, some, highlight areas that need immediate or have had longer term challenges. And I do want to say they use the term alternative retail several times through the recommendations, and I've abbreviated it several times coming ahead. Alt retail, as defined by the consultants, and their report has a nice appendix, has a lot of appendices, is anything other than a, full service grocery store. So alt retail could also be a corner store. Alt retail could be a farmer's market. Alt retail could be a mobile market. Alt retail could be the e-commerce platforms like Western New York Farm Drop or Fresh Fix or Produce Peddlers. So any other way that people are have the potential to access food or to develop new potentials along those pathways that aren't traditional bricks and they aren't traditional full service groceries. Those are alt retails. Very, very broadly. So for the specific markets and buyers working group, 4 high level recommendations. And I don't think there's anything out of the ordinary that people probably could not wholeheartedly agree that these are indeed work areas. Policy is really more wrapped into their stronger recommendations in the Markets and Buyers Working Group, as well as the Access, Equity, and Sovereignty Working Group. And when it comes to policy, even though I've summarized the next slides of their action steps that achieve each of these 4 high-level recommendations, it's the recommendation is not just for the Markets and Buyers Working Group to tackle policy. Most of their recommendations, if you look at the full report in this regard, reference that NYSOG as an entity, the working group, the regional leadership team, and partners should convene and coalesce to work toward policy. So I want to make sure that where policy is referenced does not mean that that's squarely landing in the working group. And really any of these things that are recommended to be a focus of a particular working group aren't the sole responsibility. These are starting points for working groups to consider. Working groups can prioritize any of these. Working groups can bring in other resources through us to help members have more information, because even since the release of these findings and the report in September, we've changed. The food system has changed. So think of these as, again, a living document that substantiates a lot of what we know through the research process and the assessment process. All right, so the first one of those 4, I'm not going to read all of these, but I think personally, this is probably, I would recommend, if I were this working group's facilitator, and I might be, to strongly recommend this being one of the first action items that is undertaken. And that is to establish a community of practice. And I really like that suggestion. And if you don't know what a community of practice is versus a group of diverse stakeholders coming together, typically a community practice are people who are doing the same work. So it would be, say, architects convening among architects to develop the pathway to share information, to develop a pathway to enhance their own knowledge, but to develop a pathway that that lifts everybody. So this would be a community of practice for those people for people at institutions who are the buyers of food. It could be another community of practice of distributors, the hubs, the e-commerce platforms that can provide the food that the buyers want. But there's a lot of potential here. And in the suggestion action steps for this particular one, they do recommend, the working group and the community of practice. So they're 2 distinct entities, but that the working group convenes and creates this community of practice. And again, knowing that working group participants already have time and commitments to their own lives, their own jobs, their own businesses. And if you're a farmer, you may often have not only the farming business, but maybe an off-farm business too. That's why NYSOG staff and our consultants and partners are here to support the directives and the focus of where the working groups want to appropriate their focus at the time. So I really like this one, and it seals the deal with partnerships too. It helps better connect and understand the institutional buyers world and helps to connect and better understand the world of distributors or even farmers that are selling direct into the institutional chains. The second of the four was policy work. And again, go to the report, read, these are summaries, read the fuller extraction of each of the bullets, and know that it's not just the recommendation of the working group solely, that almost everyone is prefaced that all the partners, especially the NYSOG board, the regional leadership team, and external partners start working toward the policy change. And right now, the second bullet, there has been an amazing amount of work that will amend New York State Municipal Law 103 that currently says that basically take the lowest responsible bidder, which is a prohibitor of competitively leveling the playing field for farmers or distributors that have racial diversity, that may have other challenges, that they cannot have the ability to be the lowest bidder. This the Good Food Purchasing Program with the community food advocates has been extremely active in advocating for and getting legislative support in New York State towards this end. And then, of course, the legislative session has ended for the summer. And so hopefully we'll pick right back up. But Food Future, Western New York, and NYSOG are partners of the Good Food Purchasing Program and the work toward this end. And in any regard, we can connect all of our Food Future partners to this work as well. And another thing too, I want to make clear that any of the work with Food Future Western New York in this regard does not supplant all the amazing work that other groups and coalitions are doing. We fully expect coalitions, either with a representation or members, to jump into the collective so that it's easier to connect to broader coalitions. But the Food Future work, our working groups, our staff are here to support all the work that is being done. There is no proprietary hang up. You know, we're all in this for the food system shifts that's sustained. So we want to make sure that that's really evident, that we as a collective network can be a tool in everybody else's toolbox, and that we are all coming together under this network in Western New York to rise everybody. And then the third, I believe that's the third one. And one of the other things their appendices are quite specific, and there's a lot of good information in there. The last bullet here, explore the farm stop model. We don't have that model here in Western New York. And according to one of the consultants who likes this model, there are only 7 farm stop stores. I believe that's part of a project. I'll have to go back and look. I think it's Indiana, maybe, but it's an interesting model that combines the best of a farmer's market and a grocery store and can be scaled various sizes. So we don't have farm stops here. We may have something like it, but there's a model that we, as a working group, they wanted to find out more. Maybe there's a field trip that we go and visit the organization or go and see the inside of the farm stop and work toward assembling the resources needed to pilot that in Western New York. So a lot of good stuff to get into. And I believe this is the last one of their recommendations. So a high level recommendations for the Markets and Buyers Working Group. Definitely, we've got traditional food distributors, think of, you know, like Tarantino, Desiderios. We've got food hubs, think Eden Valley growers, think Headwater Food Hub, think Berjota's in Jamestown. We've got people that want local food. We've got volume buyers that want to buy local food. How do we make this more seamless? And part of that is where that infrastructure working group spun off with conversations like bricks and mortar sub-hubs. How do you get food from smaller growers to a halfway point so that the bigger distributors can easily and more efficiently get to that? And this is where we realize what a food system is. It's that onion that you never get to the core, right? They're more and more not an onion that makes you cry, but one of those like blossoms, right? Deep fried and all that good stuff. But it's like you never get to the middle. There's more and more and more layers that interrelate with all the other layers. It can be overwhelming, but if we take it down to like, hey, Markets and Buyers Working Group wants to work on this specific suggested strategy, or maybe there's a strategy or an opportunity that has arisen since this report was published. Let's go for it. Let's work together. So almost done, putting the working groups into action. Did I miss a slide back here? Nope, maybe I jumped ahead in what's on my desk. All right, so putting the working groups, there we go. Putting the working groups into action. One of the key differences, as you heard earlier, was that these will be supported. Part of our funding not only has built NYSOG's capacity by bringing on staff, we also have funding in that budget to bring on an equity consultant, which we've got a request for proposals out now that will work among all the working groups and the regional leadership team. And as well as we've got, I think, consultant budgets for marketing communications, consultant budgets for research or specialty trainers. But we've got access to the funds to support the working groups. We also have a special discrete fund of just discretionary funds that, as the consultants strongly recommended, that each work group have a 6-figure discretionary budget each year for 5 or 6 years down the road. That was quite a bit of that was a little out of the range of where we were able to secure funding, but we have a pool of funds that can be tapped into by the working group through a process where they can say, hey, we've identified an opportunity, or we need to hire somebody to do some research, or we feel that a specialty trainer for everybody, or maybe just for that working group, could really benefit us. And it's going to cost this amount of money. So that conversation is had with the regional leadership team. And then the regional leadership team helps refine it a little bit. And then that goes to the NYSOG board, which has the fiduciary responsibility for the funds. And that sounds like a long chain of review. It won't be. We want to make sure that we're nimble and that we're responsive to needs and opportunities as they arise. So, and then all members of all the working groups and the regional leadership team will receive a stipend for committed participation. And we can talk a little bit more about that in our first quote unquote official meeting of each of the working groups. But what we're looking at is creating a schedule of predetermined meeting dates. These will be virtually for the most part for at least the next 4 months. So looking at August, September, October, November for each of the working groups. We'll poll everybody to see the date and day and time of the week. that would be most convenient, and it could be evening. And the frequency, we're going to suggest maybe starting out every 3 weeks, scaling up or scaling back as needed, but keeping each meeting agenda'd, keep each meeting focused, and keep each meeting oriented toward these action steps. And we value your time. And we know even to attend a virtual meeting, you often have expenses, right? Maybe you've got to run through the drive-through to feed the kiddos quickly, or maybe you have elder care or childcare, or just using your home electronics or business electronics. We do expect to meet at least once, hopefully twice, convening all the working groups and the regional leadership team. And so maybe we do that twice. It's not a big area, but that's the photo there is from a farmer meeting that we had that was graciously hosted by Burley's Berries and Blooms in Warsaw. And believe me, when you get farm and food system folk together on a lawn of a farm with opportunity to socialize, but then we also had some presenters. It was just a really nice event. So a stipend could cover those things, and it's a flat fee. So you don't have to expend, you don't have to show what you're going to use it for. We give you a pre-agreed amount for your participation in 4-month chunks of time. We'll let you know what that stipend is. It will be in the multiple $100 range. But also we have a pool of money, and depending on how many people we do have that finally commit, we may have to flex that a little bit. Yeah, so working groups not only are action oriented, but we want the space to be used by you to learn and share among each other. So we'd like to, each working group will have a facilitator. Right now that will be one or more of our staff. And we will assist in setting agenda, securing special presenters, and supporting note-taking and disseminating information that comes out of the working group. One of the the working groups we'd like to convene maybe the third week in August, last week in August, the first official meetings that we begin to look more in depth at the recommendations and start having some conversation and some group dynamics on looking at what should be or could be a priority. But we'll also come out of the gate with asking our working group members to help us plan at least 2, hopefully 3 full day, for lack of a better word, field trips. So when the consultants were here in Western New York, they were here for a week at a time, multiple weeks, and we booked their days with nonstop visits, right? So we would be, over here in Wyoming County, then we'd go over to Batavia and tour upstate Niagara, then we would go to Warsaw, Burley's Berries and Blooms for the micro creamery. I mean, it was a learning, it was a possible, how do I want to say this? With a group of people tracking together, it was easier to go to places that you may not have organically had the opportunity to go to and interact with people in a different lived experience, as well as see a different part of the Western New York region. So we plan on curating at least several of those spaced out over the course of a month or so. And so you can help us queue up visit sites and thematically organize a day around a certain learning outcome. And that would be not only for all the working groups and the regional leadership team to attend, but also our partners. And of course, limiting size-wise if needed for any particular site that had size limitations. I forgot to put transportation in the budget for like getting everybody together on a bus. So multiple times, but we'll have self-driving and probably carpool options. And then we've got a money in the budget to do a full-scale 1-day summit, convening, we hope, hundreds of people in the room to hear and learn about all of the trending innovations in food system work, hear and learn about the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion that is a key focus point, and learn how we can all better understand chronic and systemic racism and disenfranchisement and work toward equity and parity of all in the food system. And that we are planning not for Band-Aid approach. We don't need a 5-year commitment, but the work that we prioritize in the working groups should point to longer term sustainability. And I think we've got one. There we go. It goes to sleep. So we've got a quote from one of our former, not former, it was the former Regional Advisory Council, but our friend Chris Hartman, who heads up Headwater Food Hub outside of Rochester, is a returning participant on the regional leadership team. And he was extremely supportive and enthusiastic, and found so many people look to Chris to learn. Chris has underscored and validated how much he learned just by even interacting with people from across the region in a virtual space. Relationships were made among working group participants. Projects actually came to fruition just by people coming together in a virtual space and in person, and pieces of the puzzles were put together, and relationships have maintained, as have projects that were funded and jointly designed and developed just by working group members. And there we are. So there are the contacts for our NYSOG team. There's our website. Next steps. So reach out to us if you're on this webinar. We'll follow up with an email that has the link to the video, because I know you want to watch this again, the PowerPoint, as well as the survey. And the survey is really important to help us understand what your time availability is, and we will work to accommodate everybody as much as we can, knowing that the working groups are supported with external sources. We want to make it easy and not wear you out by being convened too frequently. But a lot of the working group work will take place outside of the meeting time, either by working group members who volunteer to dig a little deeper or contact somebody, or by our support staff. So look, we've got a poll. We'll send you a link. And then on a working group, we would like you to agree to respect the guidelines that we will drop into the first session, and guidelines on, I call these like our kindergarten guidelines, right? So we let everybody have a voice, even if you don't agree with other voices. It's a place of respect. And that we will would like everybody to, of course, agree to embody those operating principles that I reviewed in the beginning. And also, if you are a firm or private business, not-for-profit organization, anything, we would love to have you be considered as a partner. And that's no cost. That means you give us some contact information, you send us a logo, and we put your logo on our soon-to-be-developed partner page or running footer so that we can start having a visual representation of who our network partners are. And to the extent that you can, participate as much as you can. And visit our website, read the report. All right. So I'm going to come up here. Let me know if you have any questions. We can have time for a few quick questions, or you can drop them in the chat and or follow up with any of us after. Is there anybody that would like to unmute and ask a particular question? And if not, that's okay. I'm gonna check, I gotta turn this way to see if there's anything that dropped in with me. All right. Thank you. Coming up tomorrow will be access, equity, sovereignty, and then Thursday morning, infrastructure, and then Thursday afternoon, farm and food business finance working group. Materials will be available by Friday, I think. Everything will process on YouTube and our uploads. Thank you. Look forward to working with you. Bye-bye.